Cho Aniki, the Cho Aniki series, which came to PlayStation 1 and Sega Saturn in 1995. This Japanese shoot-'em-up franchise actually began in 1992 on PC Engine, featuring muscular bodybuilders flying through space in speedos, flexing to defeat enemies. The main characters, Idaten and Benton, are oiled-up strongmen who strike poses as attacks, while power-ups include protein shakes and dumbbells. Developer Messiah intentionally created the homoerotic imagery as satirical commentary on masculine video game heroes, but Western publishers refused to touch it. The series ran for multiple entries across different platforms in Japan, building a cult following through its absurdist humor and surprisingly solid gameplay. Its refusal to take itself seriously made it a beloved oddity in Japanese arcades and home consoles, but the cultural context and imagery kept it from ever receiving an official English release, leaving it unknown to nearly all Western gamers. Hong Kong 97. Hong Kong 97 on Super Famicom. This unlicensed 1995 shooter, developed by Japanese journalist Yoshihisa Kurosawa, tasked players with killing the entire population of China as Jackie Chan. The game featured crude graphics, one repeating music track, and nearly unplayable controls. What made it notorious was the game over screen, which displayed an actual photograph of a dead body, reportedly from the Bosnian War. The box art showed a digitized photo of a corpse's face. Kurosawa claimed he made the game in a few days as a joke about the Hong Kong handover to China. It was sold in small quantities at Japanese game shops and became a legend among kusoge collectors, the Japanese term for terrible games. The combination of offensive content, genuine corpse imagery, and bizarre political commentary made it one of gaming's most disturbing obscurities. LSD Dream Emulator. LSD Dream Emulator on PlayStation 1 in 1998. Artist Hiroko Nishikawa kept a dream diary for over a decade, and developer Asmik Ace used those entries to create this experimental walking simulator. Players wander through surreal, randomly generated environments where touching objects teleports them to new locations. There are no objectives, no score, no game over. The world shifts based on a graph tracking whether dreams lean static or dynamic, upper or lower. Sessions last exactly 10 minutes before fading to white. The visuals feature low-polygon environments with unsettling textures, ambient soundscapes, and disturbing imagery like giant hovering heads and endless gray tunnels. Only 10,000 copies were produced for the Japanese market. The game's complete rejection of traditional game design made it commercially invisible, but internet preservation decades later revealed it to a new audience fascinated by its commitment to replicating actual dream logic rather than entertaining players. Eastern Mind. Eastern Mind, The Lost Souls of Tong, now on PC and Mac in 1995. Japanese artist Toshio Iwai created this point-and-click adventure where players navigate a world built on a giant rotating head to recover their stolen soul. The game operates on deliberately alien logic, where solutions make no narrative sense, objects transform without explanation, and success requires trial and error rather than deduction. Each island on the rotating head contains bizarre inhabitants who speak in riddles or non-sequiturs. The Amiga-style graphics featured saturated colors and disturbing character designs that felt genuinely otherworldly. Critics praised its artistic vision, but the complete lack of conventional puzzle structure meant most players gave up within an hour. Publisher Synergy released it in limited quantities in North America and Europe, but without marketing or explanation of what the game even was, it sold almost nothing and vanished completely from gaming consciousness within a year. Muscle March. Muscle March on WiiWare in 2009. Players control bodybuilders chasing a thief through city streets, striking poses to fit through holes the criminal leaves in walls. The gameplay involves matching the fleeing character's pose using the Wii Remote and nunchuck before time runs out. Miss the pose, and you hit the wall, ending your run. The game featured rainbow effects, sparkles, and intensely muscular characters in minimal clothing, all set to electronic music. Developer Namco Bandai released it in Japan in 2008, then North America a year later, but refused to bring it to Europe, calling the content too niche. Reviews mocked its concept, but admitted the timing-based gameplay was surprisingly functional. Its WiiWare-only release meant minimal exposure, and the bizarre premise caused most potential players to assume it was a joke rather than a real product. Seaman on Dreamcast in 1999. Designer Yute Saito created a virtual pet simulator where players raise a fish with a human face that speaks through the microphone peripheral. The creature starts as an egg, evolves through multiple life stages, and holds conversations using primitive voice recognition technology. Actor Leonard Nimoy narrated, providing dry commentary on the disturbing pet's development. The Seaman asks personal questions, remembers your answers, and makes sarcastic remarks about your care routine. Its face was modeled on Saito's own, creating an uncanny valley effect that disturbed most players. The game required daily check-ins for weeks to see the full life cycle, and neglect could kill your semen permanently. Sega released it in Japan and North America, but marketed it poorly, focusing on the novelty rather than the genuinely unsettling experience of raising something that looked wrong and insulted you. Sales were modest, and the required microphone accessory meant most Dreamcast owners never tried it, leaving semen as a bizarre footnote in Sega's experimental era. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, I post videos about obscure gaming history all the time. Subscribing would really help out. Mizzurna Falls. Mizzurna Falls, on PlayStation 1 in 1998. Developer Human Entertainment created an open-world adventure game set in a small Colorado town where a high school student investigates a classmate's disappearance. Players could drive cars, enter buildings freely, and talk to townspeople on schedules 2 years before Grand Theft Auto 3 popularized the formula. The game featured a real-time clock, dynamic weather, and over 60 NPCs with daily routines. Its aesthetic and mystery structure borrowed heavily from Twin Peaks, complete with logging town atmosphere and supernatural undertones. The game world was genuinely large for its era, with multiple neighborhoods and surrounding forest areas to explore. Despite its ambition, Human Entertainment released it only in Japan, with no plans for localization, likely because the text-heavy investigation gameplay would require extensive translation. Poor sales meant Human Entertainment went bankrupt a few years later, and Mizzurna Falls remained unknown outside Japan until fan translations decades later revealed how far ahead of its time the design actually was. The Guy Game. The Guy Game, on PlayStation 2, Xbox, and Windows in 2004, developer Top Heavy Studios created a trivia game featuring spring break footage where correct answers revealed increasingly revealing photos of young women. The game was pulled from stores within weeks of release when it was discovered one participant was 17 during filming, making the content illegal. The woman sued, claiming she was intoxicated during filming and never properly consented. A Texas court issued an injunction halting all sales, and publishers' gathering of developers and Top Heavy Studios recalled existing copies. The game's ESRB rating was revoked, and any remaining inventory was destroyed. Copies that survived became expensive collector's items, not because the game was good, but because of its infamy and legal ban. The scandal destroyed Top Heavy Studios and served as a landmark case about age verification in adult-oriented gaming content, but most gamers never knew the game existed before it was banned. Panic. Panic, on Sega CD in 1994. Players pressed one of two buttons to open doors in a surreal office building, with each door revealing bizarre FMV sequences. There was no traditional gameplay, just choosing left or right buttons and watching what happened. Scenarios included a man's head inflating until it exploded, office workers transforming into animals, and abstract animated sequences that made no narrative sense. Sega and developer Office I released it in Japan, then Data East published a North American version a year later with an English-speaking guide character. The game's premise, that pressing a single button constituted gameplay, baffled reviewers and players alike. Its experimental structure positioned it as interactive art rather than a traditional game, but without context or explanation, most buyers felt cheated by the lack of actual play. Limited advertising and a tiny print run for the expensive Sega CD add-on meant almost no one experienced its surrealist vision. Stretch Panic. Stretch Panic, on PlayStation 2 in 2001. Developer Treasure created an action game where players used a sentient scarf to grab and stretch enemy faces. The main character's scarf becomes possessed, and she must rescue her sisters by entering a dimension where fashion-obsessed women serve as bosses. Combat involved grabbing their faces or bodies with the right analog stick, stretching them until they deformed, then releasing to inflict damage. Each boss had unique patterns requiring different stretching techniques. The game featured cel-shaded graphics years before Jet Set Radio popularized the style in the West. Despite Treasure's pedigree with games like Gunstar Heroes and Ikaruga, the bizarre premise and experimental mechanics confused marketing teams. It released in Japan, Europe, and North America with minimal promotion and different titles in each region. Poor sales meant Treasure abandoned the concept entirely, and the game's innovative stretching physics were never replicated, leaving it as one of gaming's strangest forgotten experiments. Rule of Rose. Rule of Rose, on PlayStation 2 in 2006, developer Punchline created a psychological horror game set in 1930 England, where a young woman trapped in an orphanage must obey the commands of a children's club. The game explored themes of abuse, class warfare, and childhood cruelty through disturbing imagery and metaphorical storytelling. Players navigated environments with a dog companion who helped locate items through scent tracking. The combat was intentionally clumsy, reinforcing the protagonist's vulnerability. Before release, European politicians politicians condemned the game based on misleading reports from Italian magazine Panorama, claiming it featured child harm and sexual content despite neither being present in the actual game. Publisher 505 Games cancelled the United Kingdom release in response to the controversy and pressure from European Union officials, though the game did release in most other European territories. Australian and New Zealand releases were also cancelled. The misunderstood content, combined with poor marketing and actual gameplay issues, meant almost no one played a game that was actually a somber meditation on trauma rather than the exploitative product politicians described. The cancelled UK release and limited print run in other regions meant original copies now sell for hundreds of dollars, with the game becoming one of the most expensive and sought-after PlayStation 2 titles among collectors. Incredible Crisis on PlayStation 1 in 2000. Developer Polygon Magic created a mini-game collection following the Tanimura family through a bizarre day of catastrophes. Players switch between family members as they survive building fires, dance battles, UFO attacks, and more through WarioWare-style quick challenges. The game featured anime cutscenes, J-pop music, and absurdist humor where a grandmother kung fu fights gangsters and a salaryman hallucinates his own funeral. Each minigame lasted seconds and required fast reflexes without explanation. Titus Interactive published a North American version with English voice acting, but released it with almost no marketing during the PlayStation 2 launch window. The game's Japanese comedy sensibility didn't translate well, and reviews criticized its high difficulty and lack of context for the bizarre scenarios. Its limited release and terrible timing meant it sold poorly and vanished immediately, leaving it as an obscure curiosity for import game collectors. Chulip on PlayStation 2 in 2002. Developer Punchline, before Rule of Rose, created a game where a poor boy must kiss everyone in town to win his crush's heart. Players approached NPCs and timed button presses to successfully kiss them, earning love points and progressing the story. The town featured a homeless underground community, bizarre residents with specific kissing conditions, and surreal dream sequences. Some characters could only be kissed at certain times or after completing obscure requirements. The game's art style used simple graphics with a storybook aesthetic. Natsume brought it to North America in 2007, 5 years after the Japanese release, but provided zero marketing and a tiny print run. The strange premise and unforgiving trial-and-error gameplay meant reviewers dismissed it as too weird and frustrating. Its late localization during the PlayStation 3 era meant almost no one knew it existed, and remaining copies became expensive rarities. Gregory Horror Show on PlayStation 2 in 2003. Based on a Japanese CGI animated series, players explored a hotel and stole soul bottles from disturbing guests while avoiding their notice. The game used fixed camera angles and stealth mechanics where guests had patrol routes and vision cones. Each guest had unique personalities and behaviors requiring different strategies to avoid. The unsettling atmosphere came from the simplistic character designs with dead eyes and uncanny movements. Players managed stress levels that affected visibility and movement speed. Capcom released it in Japan and Europe, but skipped North America entirely, likely due to the unknown source material and niche horror gameplay. The European version received minimal copies and no advertising, leaving it unknown even to horror game enthusiasts who would have appreciated its tense mechanics and surreal setting. Katamari Damacy on PlayStation 2 in 2004. Director Keita Takahashi created a game where players roll an adhesive ball around environments, collecting objects to make the ball larger. The king of all cosmos destroyed the stars, and his tiny son must recreate them by rolling everything from thumbtacks to buildings into massive Katamari balls. The game featured bright colors, intentionally simple graphics, and a bizarre J-pop soundtrack. Namco initially refused to release it outside Japan, believing Western audiences would reject the weird premise and lack of traditional gameplay. Designer Takahashi made the game with a tiny budget and inexperienced staff as an experiment. When Namco finally brought it to North America at a budget price, it became a surprise cult hit, proving there was an audience for strange, non-violent, purely joyful game design. Its near miss at remaining Japan exclusive shows how close one of gaming's most beloved oddities came to obscurity, and its success opened doors for other experimental titles to receive Western releases. Michigan Report from Hell on PlayStation 2 in 2004. Developer Grasshopper Manufacture created a found-footage horror game where players control a cameraman filming a news crew investigating mysterious mist in Chicago. The gameplay involved aiming the camera at horrific events while the reporter and sound technician faced danger. Players earned points for capturing graphic footage, with better shots improving the final broadcast rating. The game featured multiple endings based on filming choices and crew survival. Its disturbing content included sexual violence, body horror, and extreme gore presented through the documentary camera lens. Spike released it in Japan and Europe through 505 Games Street, but both regions received minimal copies. North America never got a release, likely due to the extreme content and uncomfortable premise of profiting from others' suffering. The game's commentary on exploitative journalism was lost on most players who never encountered it, and its limited availability made it one of the rarest official PlayStation 2 releases. Moonlight Syndrome. Moonlight Syndrome, on PlayStation 1 in 1997. Director Suda Goichi created this visual novel sequel to Twilight Syndrome, presenting a fragmented horror story through multiple perspectives. The game featured disconnected chapters that slowly revealed connections between seemingly unrelated characters and murders. Its presentation used first-person perspective, minimal graphics, and long text sequences with unsettling sound design. The story referenced the real Sakakibara Sato case, a series of child murders in Kobe earlier that year, incorporating actual crime details into the fictional narrative. This controversial choice, combined with the game's experimental non-linear structure and dark themes, made it too risky for international release. Spike sold it only in Japan, with little promotion due to sensitivity around the real murders. The game's reputation as Suda's most experimental and disturbing work remained unknown to Western audiences for decades. Its fragmented storytelling influenced Suda's later work on Killer 7 and No More Heroes, but Moonlight Syndrome itself stayed locked to the Japanese PlayStation 1 library, inaccessible to most players who would appreciate its ambitious narrative design. Doshin the Giant. Doshin the Giant on GameCube in 2002. Originally a Japan-only Nintendo 64 DD title, designer Kazutoshi Ida created a god game where players control a giant yellow being who raises or destroys island civilizations. Doshin can help villagers by moving objects and flattening terrain, causing them to love him and build monuments. Alternatively, players can transform into Jishin, a red hate giant, and destroy everything. The game featured simple graphics, no dialogue, and a minimalist electronic soundtrack. Villages evolved based on player interaction, developing unique architectural styles. Despite Nintendo publishing it, they released the GameCube version only in Japan and Europe, skipping North America entirely. The company apparently believed the strange concept and lack of traditional objectives would confuse Western audiences. Europe received limited copies with minimal marketing. The game's meditative pace and experimental structure made it a cult favorite among European players who found it, but its absence from North America and tiny print run left it unknown to most GameCube owners, even Nintendo fans who actively sought unusual first-party titles. If you found this interesting, consider subscribing so you catch every new video. Thanks for watching.